Top of the morning. Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah, where we spill the tea on business and the realities of leadership and everything that should make money but doesn't make money. Today, I'm very excited to have Dave Boyce with me. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And we can start right away with you
All right.
introducing yourself.
Well, I won't be long. Thank you, Leah. It's amazing. I've looked forward to this. I love interacting with you and other people, passionate people, asynchronously, and now we get to spend some time. Now, I run the product-led growth practice at Winning by Design. I teach the world's first MBA level class on product-led growth at Brigham Young University. We're incorporating your guidebook this semester for the first time in our
So proud.
curriculum. So yeah, it's amazing. That's great. And we've got students who know that this is a thing, but
Mhm.
um, they've taken 2 years out of their career to make a pivot. And so I get the students who want to pivot towards product-led growth, learn about it, and kind of relaunch back into the world with a set of understanding they didn't have before. That's amazing. I sit on a few boards. I invest in companies that are PLG exclusive, and the reason that be, and, and look, my background is a mix of PLG and sales-led growth. I'm old enough that PLG wasn't even a thing when I was coming up. So I've done a lot of sales-led companies, but I've figured out on my own, but then become simpatico with people like you and others, that the math doesn't work on sales-led growth. It doesn't work. It doesn't scale. It actually doesn't work. The unit economics start to break. The scalability starts to break. And I've decided that the future of software belongs to PLG. And so I just took my entire career and just went all in.
That is a humble take. That's very good. Okay, you're pivoting the entire thing. That's a very good
Me,
thing.
everything I'm investing in right now is PLG.
Oh, you're
Time.
investing. Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yep.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so now I usually also introduce the guests back to them because that's what we're all here for. We love this, right? We love hearing about each ourselves. So I first actually heard about Winning by Design, which is the company that you are also working mostly with, and we're
Yep.
going to talk about this in a little bit. And there's a lot of interesting people at Winning by Design. I'm not going to name any of your other colleagues. I think you know who I'm talking about, but um, I really love that you for somehow seem to really attract people with opinions and
Mm,
character, and you're one
mm,
of them.
mm,
Because the thing that I see also, like when you started to appear in my feed, um, you have really good hooks. You have really good summaries of what you're talking about, and they're really opinionated.
mm.
And I love this, but it also makes you attackable, right? Like you can challenge people on this kind of stuff. And then at some point, I think you messaged me and you were talking about meatloaf. That was like the first sentence that you sent me. So it was like, it was like,
Well, I do like
why is
music.
he? Why is he talking about meatloaf with me and all that kind of stuff, right? And some other things that we're not going to mention. But we had a laugh from the start, and I think, yeah, I would say I agree with most what you say. I would not subscribe to say that sales like growth doesn't work, but I do definitely agree on one thing. I would also only invest in PLG companies for a very specific reason in this regard, and that is because it's measurable and it's something that I understand. And I do not understand sales like growth that well.
Mm,
But as advisors, we're trying to convince companies that there's more out there than sales led growth because it's easy to set up, but it's really hard to scale and make right. So yeah, so that was one part, right? And I really really appreciate your posts because it's not just like the hooks, but also the content that you have. There's
mm,
genuine value in there. I think we're both students of not just PLG, but I think like more modern market movements um, and just what it means for businesses to be ready for this. Because as we move more into globalized markets, people have choice. You need to differentiate yourself, and you can luckily now only differentiating yourself through customer success. And you have a lot of good topics on this. So if
yeah.
people for
Yeah.
some reason do not follow you yet, that they listen to this, don't be stupid. Follow the man. It's really good content, and I'm very happy that I found you, and I'm genuinely saying that. Otherwise, we would not talk. Like it's not.
Oh,
I'm not
appreciate
talking
it.
to you.
That's amazing.
I'm not talking to you because of your follower numbers. A little bit maybe, but not entirely, right? So, yeah. Okay.
Amazing.
So let's take it off a little bit with a more lighthearted topic then. So like, how would your friends describe you to the police if you went missing now?
Oh, that's easy. It's a good-looking guy, really funny, articulate, smart.
Uh,
He's missing, tall, handsome. Like, I don't know. No, this is how I describe myself to my kids, and they're like, "Dad, no, you are old, you are chubby." I'm like, guys, um, let me live in my own delusional world.
Yeah, you're really bad at describing people to the police, you know? Like let's imagine you were let's
Yeah.
imagine you were abducted somewhere, right? And the police is coming and you say, like, that's a really funny guy. You know, like police going around and asking like the pedestrians, did you see a funny man? Just like, oh yeah, he was really funny when he was actually abducted. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Good. Okay, that does not work. So so maybe an interesting question that I love asking everyone is that it's a more personal one, and you could choose to answer it in any way that you want, of course. But what do people get wrong about Dave Boyce once they do get to know you?
Ooh. So not initially, but they actually know me and they still get it wrong.
Yeah, yeah, and it can be something that annoys you. Like, what do people get wrong about you? And you're
Oh,
just like, that's not who I am.
oh, yeah. Well, I have a modicum of charisma. Not the most charismatic guy you've ever met, but I'm also not the least. And so when people see that I have charisma, they assume um, that I don't have substance. That doesn't come across over LinkedIn because I only
Hmm.
put things on LinkedIn of substance. But in person, like sometimes people think, oh, this is a fun guy. This is a kind of salesy guy. This is a person who likes to have a good time and likes to tell jokes, and that's true. But then don't assume that there's nothing behind it.
No.
I actually really like to get into conversations about the substance. I'm a student. You mentioned the word student at the beginning.
Hmm.
That's my
Yeah, I stole that
favorite.
from you before we started the conversation. So now it looks like I invented the word.
There you go.
um, that's fascinating. So you okay? But does it bother you, or is that just like an observation that you just made with people?
um, it only bothers me if um, it's an animating um, if it's a reason for someone to not take me seriously, like
Hmm.
to not engage, to not include, to not consult, to not trust. Um, and generally, we get over that, Leah. It doesn't take too long to get over that because I do go to substantive conversations. But
No.
someone's threatened. Oh, here's the other thing. Sometimes people feel threatened, um, and I have zero animus. Like, I really have no ambition to put myself
No.
above someone else, to push someone else down. Like, I mean, I want to learn from the smartest people. I want to be around the most capable people, and I actually want all the people around me to succeed. And if that means
No.
that they lap me, that's cool. Like, I really don't care. So that's probably even better. If people assume that I'm competitive, that is actually wrong. Um,
That is that is beautiful. Was there a moment in your time where you feel like this philosophy, let's call it a philosophy, right? Like, you know, like to be a learner or like to not have to put yourself above others to define your own value.
mm.
Um w- was there a specific were you like this 10 years ago or 5 years ago, 20 years ago?
Dang,
Like
you
or
are
was
getting
this something
personal.
I'm gonna get to something here. I'm gonna get to something here. I can also share my own story if you want to, but
Yeah.
like, no, there's a reason behind the question.
Yeah. I mean, we all learn these things, right? Like the greatest among us is a servant, and we learn about servant leadership, and and um, but I would say in my own, and I just turned 55. I'm an old guy. I just turned 55 this week. And I would say,
Congratulations.
there you go. 10 years ago,
Yeah.
um, I just realized, you know what? It's not about me. Like, I mean, I knew that before, but I wasn't a true leader, capital L, before I really internalized that. And it
Mm.
was like, it's not about me. Like every single person that's in my orbit that succeeds is a shared success. So anyone that I can help succeed is goodness, and it's
Yeah.
just not about. I don't need to ask for more. I don't need to promote more. I don't need to draw attention to me. I need to give credit, take blame, set people up to succeed.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the reason why I asked you so stupidly
Yeah,
now this very,
sounds like
very
you have a
intimate
story.
question. So, what do people get wrong about me in some regards is I've talked about this quite a couple of times. So, like, I'm very, very vulnerable. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to show people that senior leaders can be extremely vulnerable and very, very specific about their failures, also the ones in
Mm,
the past, and very, very specific, not just like, oh, yeah, I messed up stuff in the past. No, no, no. I did this specifically with this company, with these people, and I
mm,
disappointed this, right? In order to show that it is okay and that it has absolutely no influence on how senior you are being perceived by others, and that this does not diminish your value in the eyes of others. In the contrary, it's the only way to generate trust, because only if I can trust that you tell me if you mess up something, then you will trust me, right? So, like, that's the thing. And I love what you said, because this is something that I'm still trying to figure out now that I am also getting much more exposed. I have a lot of people that want to talk to me. A lot of people want to talk with Leah for some reason. And I'm sure a lot of people want to talk with Dave.
so good.
But there's a specific bandwidth that you just have. And because I'm vulnerable and I'm very open about who I am and so forth, right? And I'm also gonna get to the funnier part of this also in a second. But like, because I am like this, and I also love deep conversations. I love deep conversation about topics like this that I care about, like the one that we're having right now. I would even go as far and say, like, this is the part of the sense of life, like, growing with each other, challenging each other, going with
Yeah.
discussions like, huh, that is interesting. I never thought about it in this way, and not having to push back and go like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. Of course. Yeah, I knew that. Of course. I mean, come on. You don't need to tell me. Because what you said before, without having to put yourself above others, that was me to a T for
Mm,
almost 16 years of my
yeah.
career. And I was absolutely insufferable as a result. I do
Mm,
not know how people actually manage to work with me, because I can't, like, if you would have told me something very specific, like that about particle physics, I would have probably Googled it and then just come back like, yeah, I know it, Dave. I mean, come on. Of course I know, right? Like, I know so much. And it's
yeah.
just such a
String theory.
waste of. I eat that for breakfast.
Good stuff.
Um, it is just so exhausting. It is so exhausting, and it takes away time from you of being a good leader and do exactly what you described, which is caring about others. You have to
Mm,
stop caring what others think of you. And then at the same time, so, like, in a way, what I'm trying to say is that I love this authentic approach to oneself, and I see myself in it as well, I feel like.
mm, I love that.
Um, but it does not mean that we're willing to go into a deep connection with everyone. At least that is what it is for me. So my favorite quote is actually from William Shakespeare. I always have to think about it. I think it is, um, love all, trust a few, and harm no one. And I think that's
Mm,
really beautiful. And sometimes I come off as being very distant,
mm,
because people just think like, yeah, I want to talk with everyone, but I'm actually an introvert in
mm,
that sense. And I like to have few connections with people that, give me something in this regard. And it does not need to be someone that I go and get drunk with, or like, I don't go to parties and then any none of this. So I think you framed it beautifully.
mm.
So yeah, that was good. That was very good.
Good
We should.
stuff. I didn't know this was like, a healing podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
Self-actualization.
Thank you for listening to the product healing with Leah.
I love it.
Yeah, no, but I think the maybe to close on this topic and now to segue now into the main topic, whatever. I mean, we can go on for an hour like this, and people would be
Sure.
interested. I'm sure. Um, I think coming to this realization or to this experience that once you move up in the corporate world, whatever that means, like getting more senior roles or dealing with more ARR or whatever, or like starting to lead people in a more sensible way, at some point you start to notice that everyone's shit just stinks.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what Matt Greenberg said in the second episode that I actually recorded on this podcast. And it was one of the most shared posts that I've ever had. And I would love to hear your take on this. Because
Yeah.
for me it was exactly the same experience. I started to notice everybody's winging it.
Yeah.
Everybody is, and there's a very
Totally.
specific reason for it, right? And I mean, with everyone, I mean everyone, absolutely everyone,
Yeah.
VCs, investors,
Yeah.
CEOs, especially those. Everyone, nothing is as ordered as you think it is.
Yeah.
Was that also your
Well,
experience?
so I'll tell just a little anecdote, but it's not. It's from early in my career. The first,
Yeah.
I mean, I was an interloper. Like I grew up in.
Hmm.
You're from Switzerland, so this may not mean as much to you. I grew up in Oklahoma. That's where there are like cows and horses and oil wells, and lots of wide open prairie. Um, I didn't know any business people at all. When I was 20, I don't know, 25, I find myself like in boardrooms in Manhattan, in London, in Boston, in LA. And I just feel like I am the person who doesn't like, why am I here? Everybody else has it going on and I don't. I remember one meeting in Manhattan. I looked across the table. We were actually at a bank. And so these suits were not inexpensive. They were, 1,700, 2,000, $3,000 suits. Mine was not, but across the table were. And on one of the guy's lapels, I saw spit up from a baby. And I'm like, that dude held a baby this morning. Like, he's in this meeting and he's got his stuff together, but also, like, he held a baby this morning. He might have even changed that baby's diaper. Like, we're all just humans. So that was early in my career. That wasn't like a huge turnaround point for me. But I agree with your point. We're making it up, and the more we push ourselves into the unknown, and PLG is certainly that, the more it just pays to be genuine. Like you pretend like you know it, you pretend like you know everything, then you won't have anything to learn. It's like what you were saying earlier. Like, oh yeah, I know all about particle physics. Cool. Then there's nothing to teach you. I know all about PLG. Okay, cool. Then there's nothing left to learn. No, absolutely not. Like we're way out on the forefront. Stuff's getting invented, reinvented every day. If we can share it with each other, we can learn. We can say, "Ooh, I don't actually know what you just said. Can I ask you a question? Can I restate that? I'm not sure I get it." It is such a human experience at that point.
Yeah.
It's just way more gratifying. And so, my personal life philosophy is you don't have to be the best. I like to be the first, or I like to be out front because out front is where everybody's winging it, and then we can just be curious together. But you don't have to be the best, and you certainly don't have to pretend to be the best. That just blocks all your learning.
Yeah, that is so true. My designer asked me this morning, like, "Hey, when did you learn how to be so great?" Right? But like, he did not mean it in the terms, like, in the sense of like, that I am great. It's more like, I think he referred to, I don't know, I have to ask him actually what he meant, but like more
Yeah.
like, like, okay, you seem to have your stuff together, right? So like in that
Mm,
sense, and I told him like the first answer that came to my mind was like when I started to realize that I'm crap at it.
yeah.
Um, I don't know a single person that I respect that does not have some form of insecurities, and to some degree, right? Like you can also be secure about your insecurities at some point,
Mhm.
but like your insecurities in the sense that best learnings that I had were on topics where I had a very firm belief on it, and then someone drops into my comments and says, "Hey, by the way, there's a different way to look at this."
Mm,
And I'm just like, right? So
mm,
this happened many, many times. And my old self would have not noticed because exactly of what you said. Yeah, I know. Come on. Who are you to tell me again, right? It's just like,
yeah.
I would. I'm just getting so annoyed about my old self right now. I would travel back in time and give myself a kick in the ass. I'm telling you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like myself in the past at all. But you know,
Everybody's
it
got a
is.
journey. You got to start somewhere. You got to come through some journey. It's
Yeah,
good.
but it
You
was
got
a
a lot
bit
of
too.
progress to make from here too.
Yeah, I'm gonna get there. So, yeah, so that's beautiful, right? So like this is the authentic experience that we have with things, and um, I came to a framework in my mind where it is about leaders and why it cannot be any other way. So like it is not even theoretically possible, in my opinion, that you have your shit together all the time. So even if
Mm,
you had the mental capacity for it, and there's a very specific reason for it. So I want to run this back to you, and let's see what you think about it.
mm,
So this is also something that Matt Greenberg said very originally at some point, in the sense of like, what does a leader do, or like, what does a good leader do in terms of the decisions that you take? And if it would be a 2 by 2, where you have high risk and low risk, and then you have high effort, low effort, right? On this 2 by 2, then
mhm,
you would always delegate decisions that are low risk and high, or sorry, not effort, sorry, risk and gain, right? So like low risk
mm.
and high gain, you would delegate
Got
to
it.
other people.
Mhm,
And high risk and low gain, you should not do anyways, right? So like what's left for you to do as a leader is actually high risk and high gain, because those
mhm,
require the most dedication and
mhm,
warnings, right?
mhm,
So that means inherently, whatever you're going to do, you
mhm,
mess it up with a very high likelihood because it's risky, right? Like I make a decision that makes the life of my employees probably worse at some point. It's an inevitable thing because it's just always high risk. I need to make decisions. And it's always easy to say in hindsight that, yeah, okay, we should have done this, we should have done that. Yeah, that's true, but we tried our best, and despite our best efforts it just went wrong. And I think
mhm,
if you live by the standard, inherently you will end up with high risk and high gain opportunities, and therefore you will fail often. So you need to be able to fail quite often and stomach that, because the more senior you become, the more crazy your failures actually become. You will hurt people. You will. There's no way around it, right? So that's why I think um, it has to be this way.
Okay, so you want my take?
Go for it.
um, I'm mostly with you. Um,
Uh oh. Uh oh.
Mostly with you. So my favorite definition of leadership is helping a group of people get to a place they can't see.
Hmm.
So if I pursue that definition, then um, I need to be able to see something, which means I need to have some perspective. Okay, that's cool. And I need to be able to animate, motivate, help a group of people at least have the desire to get to that same place. It needs to be attractive. I need to be able to communicate well. It needs to be beneficial, you know. But helping is a really important word to me. Like that doesn't mean that I'm pointing and saying you guys go over there, or that I'm saying, hey, come over here where I am. Like we're together. Like I might be helping someone actually get up out of their chair. We might be helping each other get forward. I may be asking for help. Like it evokes a very kind of collaborative effort. Like we're going to get there together, but let me help you stay motivated and focused. Like we're going to get there. And to your point, it's not always going to be exactly like we wanted when we get there, and sometimes we're going to have made the wrong decisions. But and as a leader, I take that risk. Totally get it. The only thing that I'm taking issue with is the word hurt. Um, I can tell you, I agree in the acute sense that some people are going to get hurt, and I some of my worst memories are when I've had to let people go.
Hmm.
Um, those are really hard days for both people, and but I can tell you, I'm in touch with almost everyone I've ever let go, and I've been able to help them in their careers, and we've been able to have a real conversation about why it wasn't a fit, why it didn't work. So if I'm helping them get to a place where they can't see, and then if for whatever reason, for fit purposes, and we've been really good at communicating, like along the way and it's just not going to work, then we can have a conversation about them parting ways with the company, and I can still help them succeed. Like in the acute sense, they get hurt. In the long run, there's a lot of learnings. Maybe we crash the whole plane, like, and I've done that before too. um, those people, like, we just went through it together. Like, we fought, we lost, but we were real people. We supported each other to the extent that help is part of the paradigm all along the way. I think in the long run, it can be beneficial to everybody.
So I have a challenge to this because I'm
Yeah.
not sure. So this could be a good conversation now because Leah doesn't agree. When Leah
Okay.
doesn't agree, there's a 50% chance that she's wrong, which is good. So let's
Yeah.
see where this goes. So I think, yes, enabling people is extremely important. And it's even a table stake, I would say, right? So, like, actually, I mean, how would you lead any business if you don't enable people? And we need to protect them. I get it with you. But I had to let people go in my career. And I'm a I would consider myself a nice person. I would say so. You know, like it's nice in the sense of like I do care about people mostly, right? But like at some point,
Mhm.
as you said, you need to make these decisions, right?
Yeah.
But there are two kind of types of situations where no matter how clear that the understanding is, or like how close that you are with people, they will resent you for it, even if you do not hold any resentment towards them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I know that for a fact, either through feedback that I got afterwards, or like they just like openly just, you know, like did not like me anymore, and they still don't do. And I hope they don't listen to this episode ever. Um, but from a business perspective's point, at that point it was the right decision, right? Because I also
Yeah.
had to protect other people. So in
Yeah.
a way it's more like this what's this philosophical concept called, like where you have to the trolley, where you have to choose like, okay, who's going to get
Oh
hurt now,
yeah.
like
The
someone. That's what I meant, right? So in that sense. So, and the other thing
moral
is
hazard.
that, yes, there you go. So in another way, like you might be in a position as a leader. It's
Yeah.
not so much in product, but like let's say you're in a CEO or like you're a founder and whatever, and you have to make a decision: are we taking this investment or not? Of a specific investment fund, and the valuation is not good, and they want really crazy terms. So, but you don't know, like if you don't take it, whether you're going to run out of funding and everything, right? So, like there will be like your information is not perfect, never is,
Yeah.
and retroactive it might be officially like, especially if you crash, everybody will blame you, you know, like that's just the
Yeah.
thing, that's just the curse of leadership.
Yeah.
That's
That's
more
right.
of what I meant in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on all that. I don't know
Ah,
what the percentage is, but there are humans that
yeah.
I've worked with who probably think I'm a dark spot on their professional history because I represented the time when they lost their job and they never got over it and they didn't think it was fair and they didn't understand it. That's and I had to make that decision, and I wish it weren't that way. So it's not true. You know, what I said earlier is probably overrepresented. There are people who have felt hurt by me, and you do
Yeah.
have to face those moral hazard decisions. And if you're going to be pushing into the high rewards realm, then you're also going to be taking high risks. And yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, we're bringing people along with us. Hopefully, we're caring about them along the way, but it's not going to be 100% hit rate. I totally agree.
Yeah, so now I'm thinking like if we turn this around. So let's say we have middle managers below us in some way, right? So like let's say you have a director that is actually managing other people and they make these decisions, right? So like they
Mm-hmm.
make decisions that are in hindsight just wrong, whatever, you know, like by whatever standard that you guide it. I think what we could add before we move on from this topic is that if it happens to someone else, treat him in a way, even if it doesn't help your performance because we're being evaluated by the managers that we have under us, treat them in the way that you would love to be treated by these people that were let go, you know, like in
Yeah.
that. So don't resent others for making mistakes. And I think
Oh yeah.
especially if they're senior leaders, um, because yeah, we have to take the brunt force anyways from the base, and it's understandable sometimes. And I totally get it. And because you cannot discuss everything out, sometimes some things are also confidential. That's also another thing where usually whenever HR is involved, you're not allowed to speak about certain things, which is also okay, right? We want to protect the privacy of people, of course. but that makes it how do you say, like a playground of theories, like, oh, what happened there, like, why was this person let go, why was this happening, right? So like this is the perils of business, and I think yeah, we should not punish people for mistakes, of course. Mhm. All right. Cool. That was a pretty cool how we say, foray foray into
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah.
So maybe just for a little context, if you don't mind, um, Winning by Design, the company, and this is where you
Mhm.
spend most of the time. Like, can you briefly talk about Winning by Design? Like, what does the company do? Where is it? What's the purpose? Why does it exist? And what do you do there?
You know, it kind of connects to your to this introduction. When you're pushing into the unknown, and when you're trying to be a leader, leading a group of people to a place they can't see, that group of people could be the market. And the people that you've observed that work at Winning by Design, especially the founders,
Mm.
kind of the early team, they're pushing into territory that had the unexplored territory. And so it's a very, I 100% agree with you. It's a very special group of people. They took on, and now I get to say we, because I'm part of the group,
Mm-hmm.
took on recurring revenue as a thing, and a thing distinct from transactional revenue. So, when you switch from transactional to a recurring revenue business model, what do you have to worry about? Well, you have to worry about an ongoing life cycle and contractual kind of agreement to deliver impact and then receive payment over X number of years. It's not just about the one transaction. So Wall Street, has been trained forever to call and meet bookings estimates,
Yeah.
and bookings and revenue at some point got conflated. I'm going to call and meet um, my revenue target. And I don't know if you mean book when you say that, if you mean bookings or you really mean revenue. Well, now that we're in recurring revenue, bookings doesn't equal revenue. The
Yeah.
bookings that I got this period are going to stack on top of the subscriptions that I carried in from prior
Mm-hmm.
periods. And that's a very different thing. That means the center of gravity of my attention as a revenue leader is shifting into customer land, not just prospect land, not just kind of where I get that first contract. So what Winning by Design said was, you know what, that calls for a clear understanding of the business model, a clear understanding of a new data model, clear understanding of compound, of how kind of growth compounds, and then um, mathematically, and then a clear understanding of what the implications are for organizations and for humans, who find themselves. And we took the traditional sales and marketing funnel and turned it on its side, and then we say the pointy end of that is the beginning of a customer life cycle, not the end of our work with that customer. And then I start working my way through um,
Yeah.
first impact, renewal, and expansion. And so we'd call that a bow tie. So that's Winning by Design. I really, really like the people. I've known the people forever who started the company. I really like them. So when we sold our last company, and I made this decision that we talked about to commit my own time and attention, intellectual energy to product-led growth, I called Winning by Design and I said, I called Jocko, the founder, and I said, what do you think about PLG? And he's like, why do you ask? And I said, well, like, I'm going all in. Like, I think the future of software belongs to PLG. And he's like, so you've had the aha moment, huh? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? He said, you figured out that the math doesn't work.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I've had that aha moment. Um, he's like, yeah, we believe that too. Like, what are you doing about it? He said, well, we acknowledge it. We don't have a lot of expertise in it. Like, should I be talking to you? And he said, yes. So that was kind of like how I came over. But the way that we think of Winning by Design is that, revenue can be understood. It can be systematic. It is a system.
Yeah.
It managing it in silos is not productive. Even in human-led motions, it's not productive. I got to understand which piece of the system I'm working on, how it interacts with the other systems, how opening the aperture in marketing can actually hurt you in sales, or opening the aperture in sales can actually hurt you in renewals and expansion. And so I got to look at that whole thing as a system. I got to understand how the math works, and I've got to measure and monitor across that. Now, when I say the math doesn't work in sales-led growth, that's a provocative statement. It doesn't work forever, and it is not optimal. What I mean is, if in a situation where you could hire the product to do a revenue function, like you could hire the product to book a sale, or you could hire the product to renew itself, or you could hire the product to expand itself, and you don't, and someone else does do that, you're just at a fundamental economic disadvantage, because
Yeah.
the person who is hiring the product to do those revenue functions is getting a lower cost of revenue than you are, and you just can't scale as fast. You can't scale as reliably, and you're going to
Yeah.
be at a fundamental disadvantage. Like the laws of physics are going to be working against you. So
Yeah.
anywhere where we can hire the product to do functions that humans did in revenue, we want to do. And the answer is not that you can always do that. Totally get it. There's, you do bring sales in. Some of our customers are like Sneak and Calendly and GitLab and Asana, and like companies that grew up through the PLG motion, and now they need to add human-led motion on top. Okay, cool. That is actually a thing. I definitely agree with it. But hire the product to do what it can do efficiently, and then hire the humans what they can do efficiently, and then get those two systems to work together in a system, not in silos.
Yeah, 100%. So I hope I can formalize this because in my head it sounds really cool. I have a different kind of approach to this that arrives at the same conclusion.
Mm,
And I think just in regards to winning by design and what Jaco was doing as well, and I feel like this is the entire approach also to winning by design in terms of formalizing and demystifying PLG into different kind of models, like the
mm.
the growth model that he uses, the operating model, the mathematical model, and so forth and so
Yes.
forth.
Yes.
All of this is going into a very, very specific direction. I'm going to get to this now in what I'm talking about, in the sense. So you mentioned bookings, right? So like, and if we look at bookings, so like the contract that the contractual value, the money that someone has promised us that they're going to pay us, either whatever in the future through some kind of payment scheme, or like that they've given us already for an extended period of usage. Um, this is the thing that you learn as a founder in a very hard way if you go into an investor meeting and you say, "We have 5 million of bookings." And then they're going to ask you, "Okay, chill out. How much money do you make in this particular year?" What do you mean? Like 5 million and we already booked? No, that's not what we mean. What we know, then you explain them, okay, this is realized revenue. This
Mm-hmm.
is the real revenue that you have, right? So like you're going through these loops to just, you try to kind of break the sales ball that you have into something measurable, right? And that's why we invented realized revenue. So you should never talk to anyone, even if you have a sales led motion going. You should never talk to stuff that you haven't realized yet, unless the customer has used it. It is not your revenue. That's the first mistake that people make.
Yeah.
And here's where this becomes actually bigger, because let's say you have this actually done and everything works, right? I don't necessarily agree that it cannot work in sales led. And I think there's actually some companies out there that actually work sales led, but you will not notice if it doesn't work anymore, because fundamentally, what product led growth always needs. So every product led growth distribution model that is successful has one condition that is always met, always. And that is not the case for sales led. And that is, you need to have visibility into your data, because it cannot work otherwise.
Mm,
But for sales led can work without having an insight into data. You can close a contract without having any data. It's
mm,
possible. And the lure of this is that you think it worked once, so I'm going to do it again. And then
mm,
I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to teach them how to do it. And then the scaling is kind of like, now I teach others to teach others, right?
mm,
And this is a problem because this becomes a chaotic system where your product underneath might deteriorate slowly, right? So maybe in January, you might close one contract less than you did in December, because your product got shit. But will you notice that? No, you won't. You won't, because there's too many factors that could influence your lead pipeline and so forth. So this is where I agree with you, right? So like I'm coming now to the same point, and that's what I say to people all the time. Even if you do not manage to get to a full PLG model, which is totally possible because of processes or like, like the company's just the way that it is, there is no excuse for you in any way in today's market to not have data visibility, surfacing it towards salespeople, because the truth is 96% of all PLG companies have salespeople, dedicated salespeople. That does not mean that they're sales led, but they do something like product led sales. And the
Yeah.
effect of this is that they are more focused on the customer, actually. This is a notion that we have to absolutely dispel. It's not
Yeah.
against sales, it's not against marketing. It is about producing data and bringing it into all of these departments.
Mm.
So product becomes kind of a service point to this. And that's how I look at it. And that's also how I structure my product at Jua.
Yeah.
Or like I want to, right? Would you agree with this?
No, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Amazing.
I talk to sales leaders all the time, and salespeople all the time. And I just had a conversation, gosh, was it yesterday? For a sales leader who didn't really hadn't been engaged, engrossed in product led growth. And I was explaining to him what it means and what it is. And he said, and he was, he's like, boy, I'm feeling like a dinosaur. Does that mean we don't need sales anymore? We're not going to need sales anymore. Like, I'm feeling really, and I'm like, no, it does not mean that. It means, well, what I said to him was, I have a lot of friends who are in sales who once having worked for a PLG company, for a product led company, will never work for a different kind of company, because the prospects and customers that you engage with, the customers that you engage with are already customers, and you already have data, to your point, Leah, and now you're just helping them. Now you're like, as soon as you show up, you're on their side of the table, looking at the problem from their same perspective, and you're helping them figure out, what could I do more? And that's an amazingly advantageous spot versus trying to talk someone into something that they haven't heard of before. At this, yeah. So I honestly believe that PLG is software's industrial revolution.
Mm.
I honestly believe that we are figuring out how to get machines to do the repeatable tasks and how to get humans to operate the machines instead of be the machines.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you described it, those humans are now getting data back from the machinery and then operating the machinery based on what the data is telling them. That's a way higher order skill. It's a way more humane place to get a human to live than to be negotiating terms on a contract or talking about, or pushing paper back and forth around a renewal. Like, those do not have to be human-led activities.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think I love the example that you made with the salesperson that you've talked to, because I also had these conversations in my life, and I usually always tell this story. So I don't think I ever told this on the podcast on this, right? So like my story always goes like this. So if you take the most stereotypical sales environment that you've ever been in, and I've been in many of them, and I don't mean this in any offense to anyone that is in sales or whatever, but like the stereotypical, I don't know, like vibe is, it's very macho, it's very loud. Getting in the morning, we're screaming at each other, we ring a gong before shit happens, right? And then we get wasted in the evening with champagne and some other stuff, right? And as funny as that sounds, there's a reason why this was the case. The sales as a day-to-day business in the way that it was done in the past, and imagine you have to sit in front of a telephone and do outbound calls with people that do not want to hear from you, and you're calling 100 people, and 95 of those hang up on you or just scream at you and tell you what a horrible human being you are. Now you have 5% who pick up the phone eventually if you're really good, right? In cold calling. Now maybe you can convert, I don't know, another 5 or 10%, depending on the product and like how well did you actually, qualify your leads in beforehand. Maybe you can qualify 5 or 10% of those afterwards. You went through 150 rejections before you were ringing the gong.
Mm.
That must grind on you. You will
Yeah.
have days where people just tell you how shit you are and how bad you are and how you cannot close anything. This is not a fun experience. So, what
Mm.
happened? What did we do to compensate for this? We had to pay salespeople really high salaries to do this
Mm-hmm.
job because it's not a
Yeah.
fun one, but it is an incredibly important one. Essentially, what a salesperson does, also nowadays, is to find product customer fit. It's not just about convincing, right? Like, it's not a fair representation of the job. It's not about, oh, I need to convince Dave so he falls into my trap so he pays for my product. No, no. The best salespeople still today find out what is Dave's problem. Do I have something to offer to him?
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like it's not going to happen, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
not, because there's nothing good for me in there. I think the evolution of product-led growth is just giving salespeople more tools to get rid of this horrible experience. Wouldn't you love to have more like a closing rate of about 20%?
Mm.
And then you interact with these customers individually also a little bit longer. And then they say, yeah, but do I still earn the same amount, right? Because in the end it's about money, right? Of course. But like, do you still earn the same amount? Yes, you do, because we're going to reward you for more per customer, but in a different way. It's not about when they sign, it's over. When they sign, it starts.
Mm.
And we want you to like to stay, especially with the extremely valuable contracts. You have to stay with them. If you keep them successful, whatever that means in your metrics, I don't know, use the product 2,000 times in 30 days or whatever. We will reward you on the expansion. We will reward you if you make our customer more successful. Oh, that's interesting. So how much does that pay, right? So, and then you get into the territory where you need to learn as a PLG sort of pivoter, if you want to call it this way, to incentivize sales correctly. But if you do that, you make it a very humane experience, and then sales can really say like, this is cool. I'm
Yeah.
actually now responsible for making
Yeah.
people successful, and they pay me for it. This is much better than like ringing the gong in the morning. Nothing against gongs. It's better than
Mm.
just ringing the gong every time you get through in like 1 out of 200.
Yeah. And
That's
then I
what it
could
is.
let down. It actually goes back to our conversation about humanity at the beginning of this
Yeah.
podcast. Then I could let down my guard.
No.
It's not about pretenses anymore. It's not about me knowing a lot. It's not about me kind of girding up my courage to make the 99th call and the 100th call, into the unknown with people who probably don't want to hear from me. It's about me being a human and you being a human and me trying to help you accomplish, what you're trying to make progress on. And I
Yeah.
see you're using my product. I see that you've done some amazing things. How can I help? Not
Yeah.
what can I sell you, but how can I help? And that's a way more human interaction. And I probably don't have to go self-medicate at the end of the day if I'm having those conversations all day.
Yeah, and the conversation just changes. Like it's in a sense, it's exactly what you said. That the conversation shifts from, "Hey, let me tell you a list of 20 features, and hopefully you're gonna bite on one of them," to, "So I've seen you using our product, and you already invited like 20 people to it. You must love it, right? So like, I also see that you use this particular portion, and it's not customers." Don't feel threatened by this. They're like, hey, that's really amazing. Cool. Yeah, I wanted to ask you something about this. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about, do you also have some options where you can do this and that? This was the
Mm.
most, I can tell you, like, the most amazing experience in my investor um, story that I have, which is not a big one, is that I bought a relatively substantial, at least for my kind of size, a relatively sizable amount of HubSpot stock.
Mm. Mm.
And I did this when it was at 170. I don't know exactly when that is now. I have to look on the stock price, but it was at 170. That was about 2.5 years ago when I brought
Mm.
HubSpot into the company at Small PDF. The question was, we need a CRM for, to manage our entire sales process. And I was testing stuff. It was the first time I actually really digging into HubSpot. I was aware of them, whatever. But the thing that struck me was like the sales process did not feel like a sales process. It was really about customer experience. And then after we
Yeah.
closed, they gave me someone, I think her name was Kate. Kate, you're amazing. She was just there to answer our questions, nothing else. There was no sales, there was no upsell, nothing. She was just like, hey, we have a question. How can we actually configure this particular flow, like, and when this email triggers, then this triggers. She took care of us. She really did. And I know it's for a business in the end, right? But that was the first time where I actually experienced product-led growth in an industry that is very typically only known for Salesforce and the other
Yeah.
garbage that you have around. Sorry, nothing
Yeah.
again. Oh, well, actually, I have a lot against Salesforce. Let's just put that out of the way. And that was the moment where I did not do any due diligence. And I bought it and bought the stock, and it really paid off well. And it's not about the money that I made in that sense, but like
Mm.
I did it because I knew that this is the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Better than any financial statement. Because I realized in this moment, if they acquire me like this, they're going to acquire others like this. And then
Mm.
they will enable these companies to succeed against those that actually got another solution from another provider that just treats the product as a collection of features rather than customer success. And that was for
Mm-hmm.
me actually the moment where it really clicked. And I'm like, yeah, this is it. That's
Yeah.
it. That's what it is.
So
It is.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
isn't
I
it?
had a
It's
very
so
similar
amazing.
experience with HubSpot. I've
Yeah.
mostly worked in Salesforce, but I now work in HubSpot. And the first time I did was probably 10 years ago. And it was a very similar experience. Like, wow, this is different.
Yeah. It's just simpler.
Yeah.
And it also guides you more through the stage. Like now we're a small company. So at Jua, we have probably 20 people. So I'm going to go through the entire thing again. It's so
Yep.
easy to just set up and configure a sales funnel. So how do we do it? It lets us do it in the way that we do, right? With a modern
Mm-hmm.
interface. Then you send them an email to Dave Boyce for the first time. It's my first outbound. And then I get a message. Oh, Dave just looked at your email. And it's very natural. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Now I can maybe
Yeah.
call Dave or whatever. Okay, it may be also leading to some bad behavior sometimes, but um, it's just that I don't know. This is what it should be. I don't know. Like I think I'm not a believer of hype in general, but I would say when it comes to companies and their hype, which HubSpot definitely has, HubSpot still has their hype in this industry. I think it's one of the very few examples that actually deserves the hype. They
Yeah.
executed it so well, and also
Yeah.
on many product things.
And we can
Yeah.
do it. I get asked a lot. So there are kind of two ICPs from me at Winning by Design. One is the sales led company that wants to add product led, and the
Mm-hmm.
other is the product led company that wants to add sales led. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to a head of sales, actually a friend of mine. I think he's left now. He's at Pluralsight, and they are a sales led company that happen to have already built in the ability to transact with a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
So like 2 years ago, a friend of mine's name is Mitch. They said, "Hey, Mitch, our unit economics are great in enterprise. They're not great in SMB. Can you do something with that?" And he went and said, "Yeah, I think we can do something with that. Like we can already transact with a credit card." So he grabbed a group of humans. This isn't exactly um, sorry. First, he worked with his marketing and sales team and said, "How can I drive traffic
Mm-hmm.
to that transaction moment?" And then he went and grabbed one, and then two, and then I think it got up to about 15 humans over the course of 2 years
Mm-hmm.
to then basically have the conversation you're describing. So somebody comes in through marketing, they create an account on their own, and now I want to talk to them. And what he said is, we are not salespeople. It's not what can I sell you, it's how can I help. It's not what can I
Mm-hmm.
sell you, it's how can I help. Now he grabbed them out of the sales team, so he had to reprogram them. It's not what can I sell you, it's how can I help. So every
Yeah.
time they engaged, it was how can I help. He got his unit economics on that business um, to outpace mid-market and be equal to enterprise, even though these are tiny transactions, right? This is the very, very bottom, because they hired the product to do what it could do. And then when humans engaged, they engaged as almost concierges, not as salespeople. And it just worked the same way you described with HubSpot.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if there's one tip in there, if you ever go into as a consultant or with a company that you are to advise um, people that want to do this move in that sense, I have always one kind of philosophy that ties in what you just said in the sense, and that is it's way easier to bring product to sales because product people inherently are more closer to this philosophy that you just described already, like the customer centric behavior. We've been doing it for a longer time than to
Mm,
teach someone in sales how to do product.
mm,
And I firmly believe this. And that's what makes it so difficult if you have a sales led company that does not even have anything product led to
mm.
transition into product led sales. Because for some people, that's also what I heard sometimes, like, so how can we do product led sales? And they have not done anything in terms of product led, right? So because it's, it has the word sales in it. So it's just like, okay, we do sales led or we do product led sales. And that does not convey even the slightest problem that you're starting to open up, because we need to make you first product led in general before we can go even closely to
Mm.
talking about product led sales. It's just not
Yeah,
possible the other way. And
yeah.
yeah, I think that's just how I approach it. I believe that product is easier
So
to
do you
move towards
go?
sales.
I'm working with a few companies doing this exact thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
In your work, would you then go say, let me build a product led motion that is completely detached from sales so that I can get my
No,
feet under me? And then, I don't know, a year from now, 2 years from now, then we'll start to connect those two?
I wouldn't use the word years. So um, there's a couple of dangers whenever you bring product led sales into a company. And let's just say, like, because I have to start from this direction, right? So, like,
Yeah.
product led sales has inherently two dangers that I see. And that is, if you try to just qualify leads and then just give it to salespeople, like you have in your mind, you like, okay, we just qualify, we just show them that this is better. Then you have an
Mhm.
inherent problem, because usually companies do not have a lead funnel that is too little, right? So this is a big, but this is a problem. If your lead funnel, if your lead size, if the size of your leads or the amount of leads that you have is kind of the correct size for the sales department that you have, then you're not a good fit for product led sales in that way. Because if you start to qualify leads, then it only makes sense to qualify them if you treat less of them, of course, right?
Right,
So what you
right.
actually have to do first is you have to fix the incentivization model in sales, regardless of what you do. That's the very first thing. Because what that does is, if I'm telling you as a salesperson, you're going to be incentivized on the expansion, just from a top down order, now you're being incentivized on the expansion, then what is
Mhm.
the first thing that the salesperson is going to say? Well, how am I supposed to do that? And then you say, I have just the thing for you, right? So, like, create the demand first. And you need to
Mm,
be ready from product side to say, like, hey, we're going to work in the background, if you want to call it this way, right? Like, we're going to introduce account-based tracking. I want to enable the salespeople in the future, right? So, like, we're going to do this first for the product teams. Try to track people. I would just want to see, like, can you track it, and can you make it so that someone without knowledge of SQL gets a dashboard that they can consume? Make this
mm,
consumable for someone in sales. And if you
mm,
succeed with that, then we're going to change their incentivization model. And then we also have to explain them that, Gary, you're going to take care of less leads for a longer time, and we're going to pay you more per closing, usually, right? That's
mm,
just what it is. And then the story comes together. So what I would say to answer your question is like, get the data infrastructure ready. That has to happen anyways, table stake. But you need to take care of the incentivization model first with sales, so they ask the right questions. Because if you just qualified for them, it doesn't work. Because a salesperson that has too little to do is going to grab leads out of the funnel, whether you allow it for them to take it or not, right? And then you kind of lose them on the way. So
So
my
if you had
prediction,
100 units of energy to invest in a sales led company to get them more product led, you might put those 100 units of energy in instrumenting the current product so that I can,
okay,
as a salesperson, well, I mean, obviously you're going to change the incentive structure, but once the incentive structure is fixed, you're not going to work on acquisition, you're not going to work on activation, you're going to work on the current product,
yeah,
and visibility into the current product so that you can get salespeople using that data to expand customers.
exactly. And here's an even hotter take. I believe in a very specific trend that you might have heard for the very first time, and I don't know whether it's going to work, but like, I think what's going to happen in the next 5 years, we will see the rise of roles or product manager roles that are called product sales managers. And what they do with their team, just stay with me on this. assuming you have growth teams. Growth teams are essentially product teams where you add a marketer and then, like you take care of the entire funnel. Let's say we agree on this, right? So these are really great for scaling.
Yep.
What if I manage to get a team, a classical product team that is very customer centric? They're very good at measuring things. And I just say, like, guys, I want to test something with you. You are going to be the new pioneers to establish a new sales process just from your team in a hypothetical, experimental driven way, as you always used to do with your features and your product and so forth. And your job is to establish and make sure that you prove the entire sales cycle from start to finish. And you have engineers, so if you need to change something about dashboards or internally in the product that this actually works with the salespeople, then you can do so, right? But like this will be your thing. And we're going to teach the product manager sales jobs. They're not going to be incentivized. You can completely ignore this. All they do is they have to prove that this is a process that can work, so it can be handed off to a salesperson afterwards that does not have engineers. And I think that is going to be the future. And I think, and I've never heard this idea from before. I know that Elena, for instance, also has some ideas on like growth sales teams, like something. So it goes a little bit also into this direction. So I think we're kind of come to the same conclusion. But I do think that this revolution is happening from the product side. So they can prove that this works. They define, it's almost like sales ops from a product side, if you want to call it this way. Like we're enabling salespeople. We prove to them that this is the better way. And you can, even if you have an existing sales organization, you can say, we think that this team of engineers with a designer and with a salesperson will perform better than the salesperson alone. We can pit them against it, right? So like if we believe that qualifying leads works better than just cold calling people or like just sifting like blindly through inbound leads, we can prove this. And that way, I think is going to be the future. I'm betting on this. That's my intelligent thought for the day.
I like it. I'm just running through in my head the companies I'm working with right now and where we could pilot that.
You know why I think it's going to work? Product managers, the good ones, are already salespeople.
Yeah, they think like CEOs for sure. Yeah.
And they're really, really good in actually creating a customer fit with the things that we have. And now if you tell them how to close a contract and send a final file to sign it, in the end, they can make that process good as well. And I think that's what's going to happen. So I think as a salesperson, you need to be ready for this. If you are not willing to get rid of your dinosaur ways, as you said, maybe there's no future. I don't know. Maybe it sounds a bit grim, but like this is a trend that I'm betting on for sure.
Yeah. Love that.
Isn't it amazing?
It's good.
Yeah, Dave,
we have to be courageous.
Yeah, we have to get to a closing of this episode. I know we're already been running an hour. I swear to God, this was absolutely amazing. And too short. So I hope we can do another episode at some point because this was genuinely beautiful. So I will give you the word. How can people get in contact with you, and what would you love to? With whom would you have to have? With whom would you love to have contact? And how can people be of any use for you?
Anyone that I can learn from is my friend. So, like, LinkedIn is a great place to connect. I would love a follow. I would love to follow you back. I'd love to learn from you. We're all pushing into the unknown, and we can learn together. Happy to take DMs. That's the place where I'm most active, I think, is LinkedIn, and we could figure it out from there. And anyone who's got courage to continue to kind of break new ground and push into the future is my friend. And look, we said this at the beginning. We know what we know, and if we're smart, we know what we don't know, and we know that surrounding ourselves with other smart people is going to help us figure it out faster, make progress faster. So let's do it together.
What a beautiful closing. And here's a tip for anyone that writes to Dave. If you include a fact about meatloaf, the chance that he's going to reply is going to be infinitely higher. Thank you so much, Dave. This was absolutely beautiful. And thank you everyone for listening.